What is the most lawful evil thing that you've witnessed? Story 1. My uncle sued his 74-year-old mother. Long story short, he lost the case, but it left my grandma in serious debt for the rest of her life, and he couldn't care less. Another story I have is about my grandfather, who was the CEO of a local steelworking company way back in the World War II era. Now, during the war, the demand for metals skyrocketed, and his company ended up making a ton of money. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2013, leaving his wife, my grandma, his daughter, my mom, and his son, my uncle. Each of them received about $600,000, I believe. However, my uncle burned through it all on things he didn't need, such as 4K TVs and a brand new high-end SUV. By May of 2016, he had spent all his cash on useless stuff and bullied my poor 90-year-old grandma into giving him more money from her share, which was supposed to be her retirement fund. Sometimes he even threatened to kill himself if she didn't give him a certain amount, exploiting her love for him to buy more junk. Story 2. I'm not a gambler, so I don't know if this is common, but the only time I've ever been in a casino, I saw a cash machine that would give you an instant second mortgage on your house. This was Reno in 1989 at a family reunion. I stood there, looking at it, and realized I was standing in front of an evil incarnate. Story 3. Civil asset forfeiture, $25,000 was legally taken from my grandfather, who had Alzheimer's but wasn't diagnosed at the time and couldn't tell the cops why he had that much money on him to buy a new truck because he forgot. The cops just took the money and left without any charges being filed. We didn't find out until a year later when the police department sent a seizure receipt to his house, and we found it while cleaning. We couldn't do anything about it because the police department had already spent the money. Story 4. I sell car parts. I'm a very small player in a fairly niche market that contains a couple of other small players and 2 big players. One of the big players collapsed, owing a lot of people money. Very unfortunate, but it happens. The administrators were called in and the owner issued an emotional message on Facebook saying how sorry he was, citing sickness in the family and expressing sadness. He also said not to worry because the business had $400,000 in new stock on the shelf and the administrators would sort it all out. However, it later turned out that he knew he was about to fold but continued taking people's money even though he had zero intention or capability of supplying them. He transferred the secondhand parts side of the business into a new business which his father opened in the same name at the same address. The new business also scored the website. Somehow, he worked out a deal with the administrators whereby the $400,000 in new stock was purchased by the new business for $14.5 thousand because the new business would not give the administrators access to the website to identify any of these specialty parts. He apparently intends to go back into business, but since all the people he owes money to are going to get pennies on the dollar, it would be incredible if anyone trusts the family again. Story 5. The woman who sued was a serial suer, not her dead friend. While in the funeral procession of her best friend, she suddenly stopped her car, causing the parents of the deceased who were behind her to bump her bumper from behind. The woman sued the parents for back and neck injuries and won. The last postcard received from her showed her dancing it up in Greece. Her family won't even let her come to visit on their properties anymore for fear she'd fall and sue. She travels a lot and may pop into town unannounced, but everyone who still talks to her insists on meeting her at a restaurant. This incident has now become family lore, warning family members not to let her on their property. Story 6. This is more of a corporate evil than anything else. A customer who had put down $30,000 and taken delivery of the super specialty products made by a small business said, "I think it will be cheaper just to sue you than to pay you the remaining $30,000. Of course, the business had all the signed paperwork and everything. However, 3 months later, the customer got to keep their product without paying the remaining amount. Due to legal fees which the business had to carry and the fact that down payments go to suppliers, the partners had to open up their personal bank accounts to keep the money afloat. All of their employees got paid, but the owners had to forego salaries until it was settled. Because word gets around, they had to deal with that too. It's a total mess." Story 7. A company I used to work for went bust because the owner was staying sloppy drunk and gambling all the money away. He came in one Monday morning and told everyone to pack up their personal stuff and leave. I gave my notice a couple of months earlier and actually received my vacation pay and final check. Nobody else got another dime and payday was supposed to be Wednesday for the last 2 weeks. I felt really bad for everyone, except my boss. He interviewed at my new company and when they asked me about him, I suggested they not hire him. They didn't. Story 8. My next-door neighbor had a foster daughter whom she was trying to adopt. However, the mother suddenly heard about the adoption and decided that she wanted her child back. After a few parenting classes and drug tests, the little girl was forcibly removed by the courts and put back in her mother's care, Even though her mother was a drug addicted person who had not seen her child for almost 2 years and had previous cases with Child Protective Services. Close to a month later, the mother's boyfriend assaulted and killed the little girl. Story 9. I'm a nurse. I walked into a hospice patient's room full of family members fighting about inheritances and the will of their dying relative. One of the visitors called me back into the room and asked if there was any way to speed the process along. She asked if things would go faster if they put a magnet over the patient's pacemaker in an effort to deactivate the device. She went on to explain that they were from out of town, had bought tickets to a live show, and were worried about missing it. Basically, it was taking too long for their family member to die, and it was ruining their evening. All of this was within earshot of my super sweet patient. My blood was boiling. Story 10. One of my friends owes $50,000 in student loans that he doesn't remember taking out. The reason he doesn't remember taking them out is that his school, which was a for-profit college that has since closed, convinced him to sign a document when he first enrolled at age 17, which essentially gave them the right to take out loans on his behalf to pay his tuition. They didn't really explain what the document was, they just got him to sign it amongst a flurry of paperwork. The school then took out several private loans with an exorbitant interest rate, and my friend just started getting letters out of the blue the year after he graduated. When he was in school, however, whenever these loans would show up on his student portal, they were named a confusing code number like X4357545HFY5 or something like that, and classified as quote-unquote financial aid, so he thought he was getting financial aid. Apparently this has happened to a lot of people, but he was told that there's nothing he can do about it, especially since the school has closed. I'm not sure about the precise legality of it all, but he contacted multiple entities to discuss it, and all of them said there's nothing he can do because he signed a contract willingly. This doesn't feel like it should be legal, but the attorneys say that there's nothing they can do. He even spoke to somebody who works for the private loan company. The representative felt really bad for him, helped him drastically reduce his monthly fee to a payable amount, said that the same thing actually happened to her. She owes $10K, and there's nothing she can do about it either. Story 11. My ex had a long list of mental health issues stemming from years of sexual abuse as a child. She's tried to kill herself several times, twice in the 3 years we were together. Her parents admitted her to a local clinic, and I was shocked at what qualified as quote-unquote help. It was more like glorified babysitting. She spent 3 days there, came out feeling no better, but was hit with a $15,000 bill. This was for 3 days of supervised TV and reading with 2 sessions with a psychiatrist to evaluate her. That's not even including the overnight stay at the hospital and ambulance. Insurance covered most, but not all. Oh, and to top it off, after her stay, the doctor prescribed her medication that cost $3,000. We thought the Walmart employee made a mistake. Thankfully, she went to a different doctor who helped her out big time. Mental health needs to be made more affordable. She was 19 at the time and was already hit with a huge bill to add to her school loans and car payment. Story 12. My best friend had 2 kids with his wife, and said wife then left him for her very rich boss. She and the boss wanted custody of the kids, so they used the boss's wealth to basically bankrupt my friend in legal battles. Every time the court was leaning towards a joint custody ruling, they'd introduce some new evidence or delaying tactic. They knew that if they just kept dragging it out again and again, he'd run out of money and give up, and that's eventually what happened. Now he has very limited access to his own kids, and any access he has is routinely denied or ignored by the ex-wife. She says, "What are you going to do about it? You want a legal battle like last time?" Story 13. I used to work for Quest, which was bought out by CenturyLink. A guy bought a no-frills landline for like $10. No long distance, no caller ID, not anything. Just a landline. Why? Dial-up internet, of course, only he failed. He called his ISP from his modem and left it on for an entire month. Turns out it was a long-distance number and he didn't know. What happened next was a $25,000 phone bill. Now this was your average Joe working a regular job who had a tiny home. He worked an extra $10 into his budget so that he could have internet. It's the little things in life, only now he's drowning. He made 2 payments of $500 apiece to try to take care of his bill, but he would never be able to pay the whole thing. He called me begging and even crying for help. The way the system worked was that whoever waived anything took a penalty, and it didn't matter if it was a mistake or legitimate. Waiving anything gave the employee waiving it a penalty. Moreover, it was a sales job, not to mention that the $25,000 couldn't be waived by anyone but upper management. Nobody was willing to waive his bill even though he already paid $1,000 towards it. The fact is the company wasn't out of anything. The infrastructure was already in place and they would have made a profit on him just paying his monthly bill, but nope. The way the corporation saw it was that he owed the money and therefore, no matter how it would destroy his life, he had to pay it back. However, that wasn't the main motivation. The company can write off that loss as a loss and as such, his defaulting. Story 14. A buddy of mine had a court case and I showed up for moral support. I saw the most racist thing I'd ever seen. A cop pulled over two young black guys for no reason, pulled his weapon on them, and yelled at them to get out of the car and walk backward toward him. He put them in cuffs in the back of his car and searched their car. He found nothing, so he wrote them tickets for walking on the highway. That's what they were in court for. The men explained to the judge, he forced us to walk on the highway. He was pointing a gun at us. The judge found them guilty. Still makes my blood boil. Story 15. A decently attractive woman I used to work with started dating another coworker. He was kind of a homely, dorky-looking guy, but he was super nice, really smart, and had a very high-paying position. Eventually, they got married, and he thought life was perfect. In the first year, he bought her whatever she wanted, a huge new house, a nice sports car, and even paid for her to get some plastic surgery, including a job. Within 18 months of marriage, it came out that she had been cheating on him with multiple men, including men from work. No one hid it. Over the next several months, as the divorce came and went, she continued to sleep with many coworkers. She even had several open relationships, figuratively and literally. It was clear she only married the poor guy for his money. On top of that, she needlessly flaunted her infidelity and rubbed his face in all her post-marriage flings. Then one day, the guy didn't show up to work and no one could get in touch with him. After a few days, his manager called the police requesting a wellness check. They found that he had killed himself over the weekend. Story 16. I'm working at a very fancy hotel in Europe, and a few weeks ago, there was a big conference of all the biggest asset management firms such as Wells Fargo and BlackRock. They booked out a whole floor and had literal backroom meetings. 5 to 8 important guys from the different companies would sit together in a locked, emptied-out hotel room for 30 minutes and do business. Remember, these are all supposed to be competitors, only they could leave and enter. When one meeting was over, they would mix up and again meet in a room to talk. This was happening in 20 rooms simultaneously for 3 straight days. They also had lots of ominous packages delivered to their rooms. I don't know what was going on exactly, but it sure as hell was shady. Story 17. The Supreme Court in Brazil insists on constantly engaging in this kind of behavior. Last week, they were deciding whether to release a lot of criminals arrested by the car wash operation because they don't like the operation cleaning Brazil of corruption. Then, 2 justices voted in favor of releasing 23 criminals. One justified the vote by saying he was worried about how much a prisoner cost the state, and the other one justified the vote by saying the jails already had too many prisoners. The first justice, who was worried about how much a prisoner cost the state, was calling congressmen a few days earlier to force them to increase the salaries of the Supreme Court justices. By the way, there is a bill in Congress right now that would extinguish all kinds of prison sentences for criminals in Brazil. They're proposing this bill to save themselves because a new government was elected to start in 2019, and they fear that this new government will send them to jail for the things they did over the last few years. Story 18. My buddy married this girl he met in college. He majored in comp sci and she did vocal performance. He earned a scholarship and she took out loans. They married and he paid off her loans. They had 2 kids and he bought a house. He was the sole breadwinner of the family, but she stayed at home all day and watched TV. She didn't clean, cook, or help him out in any way. Her family were jerks to him and pressured her to leave, and she did. Now he pays a massive amount of child support and alimony. She lived off of him for years and now he owes her money? Story 19. For me, the most disturbing thing I have ever witnessed was seeing a gentle old black man getting kicked out of a restaurant because he was black. He couldn't see very well and was taking time deciding, so they told him to go to the back of the line. When he tried to order, they tried to throw him out for cutting, a majorly unpleasant cashier and racist, but that's later. He didn't understand and thought he needed to pay, put the car down. Meanwhile, the cashier was calling him, "Listen, old N-word, and somebody get this coon out of here," and the cashier literally came around and grabbed him and took him outside, then called the cops. He kept trying and the police tased him because he was trying to get his debit card back that the cashier still had. The police came and he slipped and fell and tried to get up and the police tased him. I told the manager what happened and the police, but the police still arrested him for resisting arrest. The manager didn't believe me and was part of a lawsuit. I had to testify against the cashier, the manager, and the police. The old man received over $120K from the business, but none from the police or city. Still makes my blood boil these days. As for the most unlawful thing my grandpa ever witnessed, that would be the Holocaust. Story 20. A girl in high school had a mad ex who decided to post the nude she sent him on her Facebook page and tagged the entire school in the posts. She went to the police about it, and they told her they could prosecute the guy, but she would also be prosecuted for producing and distributing child. Story 21. A neighbor was getting evicted for not paying her rent 1 month while she was in a coma in the hospital. The apartments had a super strict policy that required payment by the 5th online. If the company didn't receive payment by the 13th, including fees, they would start the eviction process. If everything, now including lawyer fees, wasn't paid by the 17th, the tenant would be evicted. Story 22. I used to run a software company and had a digital agency hire me to work on a banking contract they had and were losing due to their rubbish offshore dev team. I went on site to the bank, saved the contract, finished, and delivered the software, which took over 3 months to do. Over this time, the agency kept dragging out my invoices, paying small bits and pieces, and always saying they would pay tomorrow. After the contract was done, they declared bankruptcy, didn't pay me, and bought the rights to trade that bank contract off of the debt collection agency. They started a new company and worked that contract. Since I spent 3 months working for free, it sank my business, and I had to close it. Story 23. A good friend of mine has trouble keeping work due to his mental illness, very mild autism. He is fully competent but can't navigate the politics of most jobs. He was on a job seeker payment while between jobs. As part of this, he had to attend regular appointments and talk about what interviews he's had, etc. He recently missed an appointment. The night before, he was rushed to the hospital, and at the time of the appointment, he was lying on a table having surgery. But he hadn't told them at least 2 days before, so his payment was cut off. 2 days before, he wasn't aware of any issues, let alone ones needing surgery. Story 24. A hospital doctor, drunk, unhinged, botched a routine surgery on an infant. The child will forever be dependent on family and public benefits and is a complete vegetable. The hospital's insurance and highbrow attorneys destroyed any chance of the family of 5 immigrants receiving anything. The mom is slowly working herself to death, dad has lost everything, and their other children suffer like no child I've ever known. I think of them often, and I believe the doctor went to rehab and is back to practicing. Story 25. Multilevel marketing companies. Most distributors don't even make money and are then told they're the problem, not the business plan or product price or quality. Upline on plans that aren't available to the public are held up as models of success. You're encouraged to value only friends and family who are customers. If they tell you the truth, they are jealous haters of the success you haven't achieved yet. Story 26. My brother's friend's dad is a personal injury attorney who has so much money that he sues for fun when things happen to his kids. His son is a tenant in one of his mom's rental houses with my brothers. One day, the AC goes out and this man, whose dad lives less than 5 minutes away, asks for a per diem for a hotel because it's an inconvenience. My mom tried to reason with him, but why would you want to be around him? His friend's parents make him sign waivers when he goes to their ranches, and he does it happily while letting them know that no matter the contract, daddy can work around it. Great. Story 27. USA Healthcare. A person has a few health issues and meets their deductible pretty early on in the year. In November, they get a funny mole checked out, and the doctor orders a biopsy because they aren't sure if it's cancer. The share of cost for the biopsy puts the person at maximum out-of-pocket, which means all covered services are free for the rest of the year. It turns out to be cancer, but it's early and operable, so the person is ready to have the surgery. However, the insurance company denies the surgery based on some bull and delays it until after the new year when the new plan year starts. The person now has to pay for the surgery out of pocket, and the insurance company doesn't have to pay for it at all. Story 28. My company recently cleaned up a church after it flooded. We dried it out and worked directly with the insurance company on billing. All the work was complete, the contents were boxed nicely, cleaned and returned. The insurance company cut the check to the pastor. The pastor suddenly had a check for around $30,000 sitting on his lap and suddenly didn't feel like paying us. He tried to negotiate, but we didn't accept that since we already negotiated with the insurance company. The pastor turned around and said, I guess I'll just keep the money. What are you going to do? Sue a church? We'll make it a PR nightmare. A year later, and we still haven't collected that check.